Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 280. Greta, what's happening?
What's happening? I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was trying really hard to think of an answer.
I always catch you off guard.
You do.
Same thing every week.
It is. I know. I think we need to come up with a new opening or something.
Well, I'll try to change the way I ask it every week, so it makes it a little more interesting.
I see. Okay.
Maybe next week I'll ask what's not up.
Oh.
And then you can just think about things that aren't actually happening right now, and that's much easier.
That is much easier.
Like you're not eating your grilled cheese right now.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm also not running.
Yeah. True.
Yep.
There's lots of things you're not doing. It's maybe easier to think about those things.
Maybe it is.
And maybe that'll help bring into clarity what is happening.
What is happening? Well, what's happening right now is this episode.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
That's pretty much what's always happening when I ask you what's happening.
Exactly right.
So, you just say this episode.
There we go.
Speaking of this episode, in this episode, we will be exploring chapter 3 of the Silmarillion of the coming of the elves and the captivity of Melkor. Does that sound all right to you, Greta?
Sure. All right. Sounds fantastic.
Good. Satisfactory.
Yeah. Satisfactory. Average.
Okay. Before we get started, we'd like to give a double up air five to our patrons. Wait for it. You guys ready? Okay. Giving you enough time. Let's do this.
Yeah. Let's
do 3, 2, 1. Whoopsh. Boom.
That felt like a good one.
That was amazing.
That was. The reverberation throughout the atmosphere was unmistakable.
Just a surge of Tolkienian communion.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. It's real good.
Tolkienian fellowship. Yes.
Fellowship across the miles and the airways.
That's right.
Good stuff.
Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R. and Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien. And a shout out to our newest patrons, Lucas W., Sean S., and Andrew M.
Awesome. Welcome,
thank you
guys.
all so much.
Thank you.
And a shout out to Chris K., who boosted his pledge.
Ooh, nice. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you to all of you for joining our fellowship, for boosting your membership in our fellowship, for just being the amazing people that you are, and giving us, the financial support that you do. It means so much.
It really does. Yeah. Jinx.
Wind in our sails, right?
Yes.
So
wind beneath our wings.
Yes.
It
was me flying.
Awkward. I was like, is that John trying to dance, or is he mimicking?
As our kids would say, whenever we're watching something and it's something nice happens, it's like a tender moment. Yes, a tender moment. So,
yep.
All right. Become a patron by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. Becoming a patron is easy and lands you a bunch of cool perks like episodes, early and ad-free. And the more you pledge, the more you get. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. And hey, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. Do it right now. Hit that like button. Boom. All right. And don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed already. All right. So, and while you're at it, might as well click the notification bell, because you want to know as soon as there's a new video posted from the Tolkien Road. So
no mo FOMO.
That's right. What she said. I have no idea what she said, but that sounds right.
They know what I said. That's what matters. Yeah.
Hey, live stream. Some of y'all have been asking about when our next live stream is. So this month's live stream will be on Wednesday, February 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. So mark your calendars and be ready. Let's just come on in, join us, and we're going to be talking about all things happening that have happened over the last month, doing tons of speculating about all the things with the Rings of Power, and we'll be talking about, the last couple of chapters we talked about in the Silmarillion as well. And there's a ton of great correspondence that y'all have sent in, and we're going to be doing our best to get through a good bit of that. So
lots to talk about.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The one we did last month was a ton of fun. We've done a couple of these now, and I really enjoy doing these and interacting live with you all. So hope you'll join us.
Yes, please do.
All right. Our Tolkien quote of the week comes from Silmarillion chapter 3. It goes like this. It is doomed that the firstborn shall come in the darkness and shall look first upon the stars. Great light shall be for their waning. To Varda ever shall they call at need. So I liked that one. I especially this idea of that Varda is like who they will call to, right? And it's because they have this deep love for the stars, right? So Varda, of course, is the queen of the stars, and that's why we see in Lord of the Rings the elves singing hymns to her, and Sam, or is it Frodo? I always forget if it's Frodo or Sam or both, but in the Pass of Cirith
I think it's Sam.
yeah,
well, I know for sure Sam does. Frodo might too.
yeah, I feel like they both do, but in the Pass of Cirith calling out to Elbereth, right? And they're almost like, who, like, why was I doing that, right? But they're remembering, the elven hymn that they heard early in back in the Fellowship. So,
what does waning mean in that sentence? Great light shall be for their waning. I didn't quite understand that.
I just take it to mean that it's like for their decline, right? So you think of like the moon waxing and waning. Waxing,
right? Yeah, that's why.
Waxing means it's becoming brighter, it's getting fuller, and waning means it's becoming it's moving away from being a full moon to being a new moon, right? So the waning would be getting less bright, right? So that they're kind of the people of the stars, right? And when the sun finally comes on the scene much later, right? It's almost like the beginning of their decline, right? And this kind of fits, right? Because what have we talked about? That there's this symbology, right? Like typology of the elves being like kind of like the people of the of silver, right? Of the moon, of the stars, really of the stars more, not the moon, but the stars, and then men being like the people of the sun, right? Like that. So so they've got the golden color, and then the sun comes along, and that's like the big thing that is the sign of men. So
got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Which is an interesting thing to think about too on another level, because you think of like the sun has a very like, it has kind of a fixed lifespan on a daily basis, right? It kind of comes up and goes away, right? And then comes up again, and it's like the men, kind of generationally, right? But the stars are always there,
and
right?
The moon too, isn't it?
Well, and my point is just like in the sense of like the stars, and when the sun is up, it like kind of makes the stars less harder to see and everything, but
they're still there regardless.
Yeah I feel like there's something there, but anyway,
that's a really good point.
thought.
I hadn't thought about that. That's good. Yeah,
all kinds of good stuff like that. There's just little connections you make.
That's so good.
All right, Greta, ready? Are you ready to tell everything about chapter 3?
Yes. And I also want to know, how long did it take you to come up with that?
It took me a while.
I thought maybe it did.
Well, actually, I had another one that I was like, So I should tell you something about the other one I used this one, right? Because this one's not very good either.
I kind of want to hear the other one. Are you willing to share?
Yeah, we can do that. So the other one was, you're ready to Melkor chapter 3 for all it's worth.
Ready to
like milking it for all it's worth, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think you
picked the superior one.
Right. But that's not saying much.
But it's not saying much. At least I knew where you were trying to go with it. You had to explain the Melkor one. So
yeah.
Am I too loud?
Yeah, you're on my little sound monitor here. You're kind of hitting the peaks.
So. How unusual for me.
Well,
I must be energized today.
Yeah. That's all good.
That's all good. But yes, I am ready to tell Teleri thing. I know about chapter 3.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, let's discuss chapter 3 then.
Let's do it.
All right. So having taken a scenic detour in chapter 2, in chapter 3, we pick up where chapter 1 left off. Though the Blessed Realm of Aman is now lit by the Two Trees of Valinor, the rest of Middle-earth lay in twilight under the stars. While the Valar and their people dwell in relative security, Melkor labors ceaselessly to dominate the rest of the world, even as the dawn of the Children of Ilúvatar draws nigh. In chapter 3, we'll learn how Melkor gathered great armies to himself, how the Valar discovered the Elves, how war was waged against Melkor for the sake of the Elves, how Melkor was taken captive to Valinor, how the Elves were summoned to Valinor, how the various groups of elves came to be, and the names of the great elf lords.
Lots and lots of good stuff.
Yeah, this is a pretty packed chapter. So I thought about dividing into two, but I think we can do it all in one. So we're gonna do our best, hit the high points. But as with every episode, we won't be just covering every detail of this chapter. So we're doing our best to cover the high points and unpack the the most interesting and important details, at least as we see it. But if we miss something you guys want to discuss more, let us know. And hey, join our live stream and bring it up there. So, all right. So starts off. You want to read this first paragraph here?
Oh, yeah, sure. Through long ages, the Valar dwelt in bliss in the light of the trees beyond the mountains of Aman, but all Middle-earth lay in a twilight under the stars. While the lamps had shone, growth began there, which now was checked, because all was again dark. But already the oldest living things had arisen. In the seas, the great weeds, and on earth, the shadow of great trees. And in the valleys of the night-clad hills, there were dark creatures old and strong. To those lands and forests the Valar seldom came, save only Yavanna and Orome, and Yavanna would walk there in the shadows, grieving because the growth and promise of the spring of Arda was stayed. And she sat asleep upon many things that had arisen in the spring, so that they should not age, but should wait for a time of awakening that yet should be.
Yeah. So if we recall from chapter 1, of course, initially the two lamps were created to give light to the world, and they were destroyed, and that caused our friends the Valar to establish this realm in the uttermost west of the world that we kind of shorthand refer to as Valinor. You'll hear called the Blessed Realm, Aman. Those things refer to kind of different aspects of that particular region. But now that the lamps have been thrown down by Melkor, right, there really isn't anything to give light to the whole world. We have light for Valinor because we have the Two Trees of Valinor, right? But those are, Valinor is, of course, like it's kind of protected from the rest of the world by this wall of mountains, right? These really tall mountains called the Pelori, right? So there's no like strong daylight to help the things of the rest of the world grow, right? And so we're thinking about, when we talk about the rest of the world, you can just kind of generally think of that as the landmass that we think of as Middle Earth now, right? It doesn't look the same. It doesn't look like what you see behind me here, right? The Third Age map. It doesn't quite look like that yet. Although there are some things that we'll hear talked about from, that we're familiar with from Third Age stories. But it's a much different map, right? At this time. So, but there's, the things that were growing under the light of the two lamps are no longer growing. Like their growth has been checked. And, for most of the Valar, this is kind of like, they're not terribly concerned about it, but we know that Yavanna cares about the growing things, right? Those are, that's her, that those are the things that she deeply cares about, that really are part of the music that she helped create. And then we have Orome, of course, because he's the rider, right? He loves to ride through all of these vast lands, and you ride through these vast lands, and if it's you see things that should be growing and they're not growing, and well, then you're probably concerned about that, right? Or if you see things that you're like concern you, like, oh, there's bad creatures dwelling here, that are hurting the other creatures, that's also concerning. So so it's really Yavanna and Orome are the only two Valar that are really that concerned about this at this time.
Okay.
So we also learn a little bit about what Melkor is up to these days, right? So, he went off and hid after he threw down the two lamps. The Valar went after him, but couldn't find him. And then they decided to create their realm in the uttermost west. And that kind of left the rest of the world for Melkor and his minions to do what they would. So we learn a little bit about them now. So it says, in the north, Melkor built his strength, and he slept not, but watched and labored. And the evil things that he had perverted walked abroad, and the dark and slumbering woods were haunted by monsters and shapes of dread. And in Utumno, he gathered his demons about him, those spirits who first adhered to him in the days of his splendor, and became most like him in his corruption. Their hearts were of fire, but they were cloaked in darkness, and terror went before them. They had whips of flame. Balrogs they were named in Middle-earth in later days, and in that dark time Melkor bred many other monsters of diverse shapes and kinds that long troubled the world, and his realm spread now ever southward over Middle-earth. Yeah, so Utumno, of course, is his main stronghold. It's in the north of north of Middle Earth, kind of in the north central part of the world. And we learned about the creation of these Balrogs, or the forming of these Balrogs, right? We learned a little bit about them in Valaquenta. And then there's just other creatures that we don't know much about that are also, but that we assume are part of this, right? So just kind of think of this like the rest of Middle Earth right now is kind of this demonic hellscape, right? It is a scary, scary place, and it's because the Valar have really decided that they're not going to concern themselves with it too much right now. Goes on a little bit. Melkor made also a fortress and armory not far from the northwestern shores of the sea to resist any assault that might come from Aman. That stronghold was commanded by Sauron, lieutenant of Melkor, and it was named Angband, right? So you have Utumno, main fortress of Melkor, and then you have Angband, which is the one that's like kind of the, it's like the it's not right on the shoreline, but it's much closer to the ocean, to the shoreline of the ocean that separates the Blessed Realm from the main landmass of Middle Earth. And Angband is going to be one that carries forward and plays a major part in the rest of the Silmarillion. So, but yeah, we have Sauron there, right? So, I mean, Sauron is one of the bad guys from the very beginning, right? From very early on in the Silmarillion. Of course, he was brought up as well in Valaquenta, and he'll come up a few more times in the Silmarillion as well. So, but right now, he's just kind of the second in command, right? He's not the main bad guy like we usually think of him when it comes to Middle Earth.
So the Angband is closer to Aman than
Yes.
Utumno is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just think about it like, so just think of a big map, right? And then Utumno is like almost think of it like right in the center, like north central part of the map. Okay. And then you get close, and then you go more to the west. And I think I'm not sure which direction that would be for you guys because I'm looking backwards at this, but so you go to the west and towards the west, and you get closer and closer to the ocean, and then Angband is going to be in that region over there. So
cool.
Yeah. All right. So that's the stages set for what's going to happen in the rest of this chapter with those various details. So the Valar, it's not the Valar just completely don't care, but they are they're hesitant, right? They're like, we've got this peace in the world, like what do we need to concern ourselves with the rest of the world right now? But of course it's Yavanna and Orome who are kind of making the case that they need to do more for the rest of these outer lands. And they're like, by the way, and this is because, and they know this is something that's going to concern all of the Valar, right? The children of Ilúvatar are going to come sooner or later, right? And they basically say to the rest of the Valar, shall they call Melkor Lord while Manwë sits upon Tanaquedel, right? I mean, so
that's all they'll know, right?
Right.
I mean, because if they have no presence there, all they're going to know is Melkor when they come. Yeah, that's a good point.
And you're like, well, that's a really good point. That's just got to change some minds, right? But actually, no, right? So I think they hear him, but they're like, yeah, but we're just not going to do anything about it right now. And it's really interesting what Manwë says, right? And this is of course part of the quote of the week that I gave, right? He says at the bidding of Manwë, or I'm sorry, Mondo speaks, but at the bidding of Manwë, and he says, in this age the children of Ilúvatar shall come indeed, but they come not yet. Moreover, it is doomed that the firstborn shall come in the darkness, and shall look first upon the stars. Great light shall be for their waning. To Varda ever shall they call it need. So there's this sense in which, maybe Manwë and maybe even Mondos a little bit, because he is kind of this master of fates, right? That they have a deeper insight into the overall will of Ilúvatar, right? And for the the picture that he's painting ultimately, right? The story that he's telling ultimately. And it's pretty much, they're like, I understand this kind of sucks, but this is the will of Ilúvatar, right? This is, when you say something is doom, I think that's really what you're talking about, right? It's like, this is the will of Ilúvatar, that the firstborn should come in darkness, and that they should, have this special affinity for Varda and the special love of the stars, right?
That it's basically doom can be translated destined, right?
Yes.
So the Ilúvatar has put in part of his plan for the firstborn to have a special affinity in relation with Varda. So if they don't come in darkness, that would be really hard to build, right?
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't have any need for her.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yes. It's that whole question, that whole theme of, of like fate and free will and,
Mhm.
Even of theodicy and why God allows things like certain things to happen. Right.
Mhm.
Is there a rhyme or a reason to it? Is there some greater purpose to it? Is there, um, is it all just kind of random chance and it's just how it unfolds, or is there a greater purpose to it that we may not understand, but that maybe one day we will, right?
Yeah.
We'll look back and understand in a deeper sense, and even say like, that wasn't fun to go through, but I understand now why it had to be that way. And look, it's not just me saying that. It's this is, I would argue this is something that Tolkien is drawing out in this text. I think it's one of the main themes that runs all the way through the stories of Middle Earth, through the entire legendarium, is why does God allow certain things to happen in certain ways, right? Is there a deeper purpose for it, right? That's just, that for the things that we, for the evils we truly know as evils, for the things we like, that certainly seems evil, like all of those things together. Why must we pass through those things, right? And
that's where trust comes into play, right?
Yeah,
and faith.
And absolutely, and it's also just, I think, what Tolkien is wrestling with through this whole legendarium, right? And again, just a slight detour. Remember Tolkien's own story, right? He suffered a lot of difficult things early on in his life. Death of his father before he even knew him, right? When he was still very young. Death of his mother when he was really just, he and his brother were just a boy, so orphaned, right? World War I, and seeing many of his friends die, and and just seeing the horrors of it for himself. In addition to who knows what else, right?
Yeah.
And other things I'm sure we could list off, but those are some pretty bad things to have to experience as a from a young age, in this world. So he's wrestling with all those things and trying to find the goodness and the beauty in it all, right? That's the ultimate goal, right? Is to find the goodness and the truth and the beauty out of this life.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
All right. So, having spoken about Varda and the special role that she is going to have when it comes to the firstborn, to the firstborn children of Ilúvatar, the elves, we get a really interesting paragraph about Varda and her next actions. So, Greta, do you want to read this?
I think there's too many hard words in it. I think you should do it.
You want me to read it? All right.
Yes.
Then Varda went forth from the council, and she looked out from the height of Tanaquetl, and beheld the darkness of Middle Earth beneath the innumerable stars, faint and far. Then she began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since their coming into Arda. She took the silver dews from the vats of Telperion, and therewith she made new stars and brighter against the coming of the firstborn. Wherefore she, whose name out of the deeps of time and the labors of Ea was Tintale, the kindler, was called after by the elves Elintari, queen of the stars, Carnil and Luinil, Nenar and Lumbar, Alcarinque and Elmire. She wrought in that time, and many other of the ancient stars she gathered together and set as signs in the heavens of Arda. Wilwarin, Telumindil, Sorunume, and Anarima. And Minilmakar was with his shining belt that forebodes the last battle that shall be at the end of days. And high in the north, as a challenge to Melkor, she set the crown of 7 mighty stars to swing, Valasirka, the sickle of the Valar, and sign of doom. So, yeah, I think Tolkien just really wanted to name some stars.
I think he did. He did a great job.
Beautiful names.
Beautiful names. Just think how beautiful. I mean, the names are beautiful. So, the stars themselves would have been breathtaking.
Yeah.
And just to think if, there would have been no need for them if it wasn't a will of Ilúvatar for the firstborn to come.
Absolutely.
Darkness.
And, this is something I'm not going to get into on this episode, but I believe that there's been some good discussion elsewhere. And maybe even some good articles that people could point out where it discusses the different stars and how they perhaps align with, the name, like certain stars we actually know of, right? So and I love the little thing about the seven stars that are the crown. So the crown of seven mighty stars to swing, Valasirka, the sickle of the Valar, and sign of doom, right? It's a challenge to Melkor, right? These seven stars are a challenge to Melkor.
Yep.
So yeah, I love that. And just a beautiful passage. I mean, that's it. I don't know, there's a lot more to do with it, but I would also say keep this in mind, and this is something you want to tuck away in your memory to think about when it might come back as a reference. And because the stars do play different roles throughout the legendarium, right? So
they serve an even greater purpose than just providing light, right?
Yeah. And they're like signs of hope, right?
Yeah.
Like, remember, these are Varda. They're, in a way, they're Varda's personal message to the peoples of Middle Earth, right? Of the concern of the Valar, right?
Yeah.
For them.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
All right. And then we learn about the actual awakening of the elves, the firstborn. So even as Varda ended her labors, and they were long, when first Menel Makar strode up the sky, and the blue fire of Helluin flickered in the mists above the borders of the world, in that hour the children of the earth awoke, the firstborn of Ilúvatar. By the starlit mere of Cuivianen, water of awakening, they rose from the sleep of Ilúvatar, and while they dwelt yet silent by Cuivianen, their eyes beheld first of all things the stars of heaven. Therefore they have ever loved the starlight, and have revered Varda Elentari above all the Valar. So they awake by this large inland body of water called Cuivianen. And, there's no maps that I'm aware of that Tolkien made himself that show Cuivianen. I think there's some speculation about what it might actually be in like later ages, but it's pretty far to the east. Okay. It's pretty far, you just use our third age map that you can see behind me. It's really off the map to to the eastern, to the eastern side, right? So
it'd be really far from Valinor.
Yeah, it is pretty far from Valinor, okay. And that's why they're going to have to undertake this long journey when they, when they do eventually decide to go to Valinor, right? And that also presents a problem for that journey, right? And a problem just for the Valar to provide protection for them, because you basically have Melkor in charge of all those lands, right? And so he's going to, all of his minions are going to be like, you just think about like these elves, these firstborn, they're children, right? They're children at this point. I mean, they're infants, right? Not in the literal sense of being an infant, not the physical sense of being an infant, but in like the mental sense, like they're just brand new creatures, right? They don't understand the world about them. And instead of being born into a world that seems safe and welcoming, they're born into this world that seems terrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but of course it's Orome, right, who is the rider. And one other note about Cuivianen. So we do see this note that to Cuivianen there is no returning. It is said among the elves that it lay far off in the east of Middle Earth and northward, and it was a bay in the inland sea of Helkar. And that sea stood where aforetime the roots of the mountains of Ilúin had been before Melkor overthrew it. So it's where the the lamp, the northern lamp, right, had been before that. This lake is really located there, right? This particular region of Cuivianen is located in close vicinity to where that mountain once stood. All right, so that's kind of an interesting note, right? That where the location of that first lamp, one of the northern first lamp.
That's cool.
And so the first sound that they hear as well is the sound of water flowing, right?
Starlight and water flowing. I mean, can't get too much better than that.
Yeah, very peaceful things.
Yeah, very, very peaceful.
It's also interesting to me, just as a commentary on their language, right, that the first noise they heard was the sound of water flowing. And I think of like Elvish speech as being very like graceful in the way that water flowing is graceful. It's like kind of rolls off the tongue. When it's done right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I would not be surprised if Tolkien had thrown that in there, because it's like he's trying to make the point that they like water was kind of basically what taught them to speak, right?
Yeah.
And what helped them construct their language in the first place. And so they dwell under the stars for a long time, and they walk the earth in wonder, and they start speaking to each other and giving names to things. They call themselves the Quendi, right? Signifying that they speak with voices.
As opposed to
Boom.
As opposed to animals.
Right.
Who don't speak.
And that's where Orome enters the picture. All right. So do you want to read this?
Sure.
You think you can handle? No crazy words.
No crazy words here. Okay. And on a time, it chanced that Orme rode eastward in his hunting, and he turned north by the shores of Helkar and passed under the shadows of the Orkarni, the mountains of the east. Then on a sudden, Nahar set up a great neighing and stood still. And Orme wondered and sat silent, and it seemed to him that in the quiet of the land under the stars he heard afar off many voices singing. Thus it was that the Valar found at last, as it were by chance, those whom they had so long awaited. And Orme, looking upon the elves, was filled with wonder, as though they were beings sudden and marvelous and unforeseen. For so it shall ever be with the Valar. From without the world, though all things may be forethought in music or foreshown in vision from afar, to those who enter verily into Ea, each in its time shall be met at unawares as something new and unforetold. So they were expecting them.
Oh yeah, they were.
But they were even more amazing,
right,
than what they thought they were going to be.
Yeah, because the firstborn were not of the children of Ilúvatar are not of the devising of the Ainur, right? It was not something that they came up with on their own. It was something that Ilúvatar kind of kept to himself. It was like kind of a special mystery that Ilúvatar kept to himself. So they had speculated, and I think they had seen a little bit of them in the vision, but it was kind of dim. It was a dim, through a glass darkly, right?
Yep.
And that's of course why Ale, when he creates the dwarves, he creates kind of this not quite what the elves were going to be, right?
Discount elves.
Yeah, well, you don't want to say that to a dwarf. The dwarf will.
No, I know the dwarf will come at me.
Gimli will take an axe to you.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so the they don't, it's like they're not, they know they're looking for them, but they're not exactly sure what they're going to look like. So I really loved it when Orome, sees them, right? Looking upon the elves, he was filled with wonder, as though they were being sudden and marvelous and unforeseen. For so it shall ever be with the Valar, right? So it's just kind of this like, I don't know, like what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word that I'm looking for that describes the moment, like kind of this moment. It's almost like, I almost feel like it's a surreal moment for Orome, right? Just like think like about
a fever dream, maybe.
Yeah, or just think about like if I don't know, just think if there was like somebody like a famous person from a long time ago who died, and then all of a sudden and then you hear your doorbell ring one day and you open it up and that person is like standing right there. Like how weird that would be, and it's them, right? You're like, you just have this like inner certainty that like, oh, this is Abraham Lincoln, right? Like it's actually Abraham Lincoln, right? Like I feel like that's how this moment must have
be like a pinch me moment.
Yeah.
Like you're not convinced it's real.
Yeah.
So but it is.
Yeah, but it is Orome who discovers them, and I think it's
actually Nahar. Come on, John.
Well,
let's give credit where credit's due here.
Nahar is such a great name for a horse.
It is. I know. It's like Nahar.
Yes.
All
right. So Elves have awakened. Orome and Nahar have discovered them. And next we learn about kind of what Melkor is up to with regard to the Children of Ilúvatar. So first of all, we learn like Orome loved the Quendi and named them in their own tongue Eldar, the people of the stars. But that was after, but that name was after born only by those who followed upon the westward road. So they're called the Eldar, right? Quendi is what they call themselves. Eldar is what the Valar refer to them as. And Eldar actually comes to refer more to the ones who eventually come to the land of Valinor, right? So there's certain that aren't referred to as the Eldar after a certain period of time. But yeah. But we learn now Melkor greatly hated and feared the writing of Orome, and either he sent indeed his dark servants as writers, or he set lying whispers abroad for the purpose that the Quindi should shun Orome if ever they should meet. So right away, when Melkor hears that Orome is writing about, he's instructing his own writers to harass the Quindi and basically make them be distrustful of writers, right? Because he doesn't want that he doesn't want them trusting Orome. And the effect of this is that even though some of the Quindi do they get to know Orome, some of them flee and are lost forever, right? So it's particularly tragic, right? Some of the Quindi from the very beginning are lost, and because
is that because of Melkor?
Yeah, it's because Melkor tricks them, right?
Yeah, okay.
Melkor tricks them into thinking that they can't trust, any writers, right?
So they can go to the dark side, and they're corrupted and become orcs.
Well, some do. Some are. I wouldn't say they go to the dark side. They get captured, right?
So none willingly go?
None that so let's read the passage here.
Okay.
It says, thus it was that when Nahar, Nade, and Orome indeed came among them, some of the Quindi hid themselves, and some fled and were lost. But those that had courage and stayed perceived swiftly that the great rider was no shape out of darkness. For the light of Aman was in his face, and all the noblest of the elves were drawn towards it. But of those unhappy ones who were ensnared by Melkor, little is known of a certainty. For who of the living has descended into the pits of Utumno, or has explored the darkness of the councils of Melkor? Yet this is held true by the wise of Erisea, that all those of the Quindi who came into the hands of Melkor ere Utumno was broken, were put there in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved. And thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the orcs and envy and mockery of the elves, of whom they were afterwards the bitterest foes. So I read that they were put in prison, and by slow arts of cruelty were corrupted and enslaved, right?
But it's probably because they ran away that they were allowed to be captured.
Well, yeah, they ran away, but I'm not saying that they I don't think they necessarily
It's not like they willingly.
They're like, Melkor, help us. You're the only one that can help us, right? I don't think that's how it worked.
Okay.
At least it doesn't sound like it from that passage.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's possible that some, that Melkor was tricky enough to make some of them think that, they should trust him rather than, this other writer. But the point is that he tricked them, or he imprisoned them somehow, and then corrupted them, and that's how we got the first orcs, right? They were these corrupted elves.
So the orcs are like a mockery, of the elves.
Yeah. So and it's interesting. It says, for the orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of the children of Ilúvatar, and not that had life of its own, nor the semblance of life could ever Melkor make since his rebellion in the Ainulindale before the beginning. So say the wise, and deep in their dark hearts the orcs loathed the master whom they served in fear, the maker only of their misery. This, it may be, was the vilest deed of Melkor and the most hateful to Ilúvatar, right? So the corrupting of the elves, into becoming orcs was perhaps the most hateful. It's interesting to think about the orcs, if they are, basically corrupted elves, and then all the rest of the orcs are descended from these corrupted elves. In what way they're corrupt. I'm not sure how much Tolkien wrote more about this, but in what way they're corrupted. And it sounds like they reproduce, right? So, I guess, do they live? I guess my question is, do they live forever? Are orcs therefore immortal unless they die in combat, like elves are, or did they lose that in their corruption? So
seems to me like they would lose it.
Well, it seems like they would, but there do seem to be a whole lot of them right throughout that. It's interesting. So one thing we know about elves is that they don't on average reproduce at the same rate or in the same numbers as men tend to do. So are orcs limited by that, but they just live a really long time. So that's why there are so many of them, right? I don't know. I don't know that Tolkien really got a whole lot into this. I think he was much more interested in how the elves work. But anyway, the orcs that's where they came from, right? They're a mockery of the elves themselves. So Melkor's original corruption there. So, and it's at this point that the Valar really decide to act.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Go ahead.
I thought it was interesting. Can you go back?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I found it interesting, this line here where it said, and not that had life of its own, nor the semblance of life could ever Melkor make, since his rebellion in the unland delay before the beginning, so say the wise. But I'm sorry, because of his rebellion. So like he is unable to make, like, to bring things into being on his own because he rebelled against the will of Ilúvatar. So basically the only way he can make something is by corrupting something that's already been made.
That's right.
Yeah. Which makes sense, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. And that's very, that's another theme that we see a lot throughout the works of Tolkien, is like that evil, the very idea that evil isn't actually like a thing, isn't actually anything with any real potency anymore. Like it, he doesn't have a dualistic view of good and evil. He has a view that says there is only the good, and the evil is a corruption or a perversion or a diminishment of the good. Right.
Yeah.
When you put it in those stark philosophical terms, it can make evil seem less bad, but it's like, but it doesn't make it less bad, right? Because the, in that framework, that philosophical framework, the good is everything, right?
Yeah.
The good is everything. And to be not the good, right? To be less than the good is to be diminished, is to become, is to become a shadow of the thing that you're supposed to be, is to be broken, right? Melkor lost that ability, and that's another thing, is that evil doesn't actually have its own power, right? To create, right? Evil doesn't have its own power to give life, but only to kind of perpetuate itself, right? And to drag things down lower and lower and lower, right?
Right.
Or to be kind of like parasitic upon the good, right?
Exactly.
To feed off of the good.
Exactly.
Right.
And that should encourage us, right, in the face of evil, to stand strong, knowing that the only power really that evil has is the power that we give to it.
Well,
right?
And to remember that the shadow, as it says in Lord of the Rings, in the in the darkest time, when Sam looks at the sky, he remembers evil is only, that the shadow is only a passing thing. Right.
Thing. Yep. Yeah.
So, yep. All right. Yeah. So the Valar do decide to act finally under the, with Orome reporting back to them on what he has discovered. He gets to know the Quendi, and he goes to the Valar, and they enter into the Ring of Doom. And Ulmo even shows up, right, from the outer sea.
So it's important.
It's important.
Yep.
Then Manwë said to the Valar, "This is the counsel of Ilúvatar in my heart, that we should take up again the mastery of Arda at whatsoever cost, and deliver the Quendi from the shadow of Melkor." Then Tulkas was glad.
He's like, "Oh boy, we get to fight."
Yes. Yeah. Aule is grieved because
I call him Hulkus. I'm gonna call him Hulkus.
Hulk the Hulk.
Hulk the Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hulkus. Yeah. You can call him whatever you want. Aule was grieved, foreboding the hurts of the world that must come of the strife. But they decided, that we need to do this. We need to do this for the sake of the elves. This is the will of Ilúvatar. Let's go do it. Right. And to put it short, like, they kind of kick Melkor's butt. So, do you want to read this, Greta?
Really, really kick his butt. And they change the shape of the world at the same time.
Well, these are, remember, these are like,
I know.
gods,
I'm like thinking of
fighting.
like Marvel movies are like flashing through my head right now when I think about this war.
Yep.
You want me to read the green?
Yes, please.
Okay. Melkor met the onset. I'll start over. Melkor met the onset of the Valar in the northwest of Middle Earth, and all that region was much broken. But the first victory of the hosts of the west was swift, and the servants of Melkor fled before them to Utumno. Then the Valar passed over Middle Earth, and they set a guard over
Cuivianen.
And thereafter the Quendi knew nothing of the great battle of the powers, save that the earth shook and groaned beneath them, and the waters were moved, and in the north there were lights as of mighty fires. Long and grievous was the siege of Utumno, and many battles were fought before its gates, of which naught but the rumor is known to the elves. In that time, the shape of Middle Earth was changed, and the great sea that sundered it from Aman grew wide and deep, and it broke in upon the coasts and made a deep gulf to the southward. Many lesser bays were made between the great gulf and
Helcaraxe.
far in the north, where Middle Earth and Aman came nigh together. Of these, the Bay of Valar was the chief, and into it the mighty river Sirion flowed down from the new raised highlands northwards. Dorthonion and the mountains about Hithlum. I read that wrong.
You got it.
Okay. The lands of the far north were all made desolate in those days, for there Utumno was delved exceeding deep, and its pits were filled with fires and with great hosts of the servants of Melkor. But at the last, the gates of Utumno were broken and the halls unroofed, and Melkor took refuge in the uttermost pit. Then Tolkien stood forth as champion of the Valar and wrestled with him and cast him upon his face, and he was bound with the chain
Ungainor.
that Aule had wrought and led captive, and the world had peace for a long age.
Yeah, so basically the Valar come, they meet the forces in the northwestern part of Middle Earth of the world, where we've talked about like kind of the region of Angband, right? And they drive the forces of Melkor back to Utumno, and there's kind of a siege at Utumno. They set a guard to the east over to protect the Quindi, the Eldar, from any harm, that any chance, I guess the thought is that, well, we don't want Melkor and his forces to go and like basically take the elves hostage, right?
Yeah.
To attack the elves, and then that kind of draws us away, right? So they set a guard over the elves, and they basically force this siege of Utumno, and eventually they break Utumno and uproot it. And but it's like, it's just this incredibly dense fortress of despair. So who knows how deep the pits of this hell on earth go. But they do their best to uproot it, and they take Melkor back to Valinor as a prisoner.
But who captures him? It's Tolkien.
Yep. Tolkien. Yes. Yeah, I want to see that wrestling match.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That was a sight, I'm sure.
See, that Melkor is just like, because he's already been whooped by Tolkien before, right? So he's just, every time he sees Tolkien, he's like, he's just like
PTSD.
Well, he just becomes this like ridiculous little baby. He's just like, please don't hurt me, and like Tolkien is just like laughing at him, like smacking him around,
Yeah.
And it's like, it would be enjoyable to watch, just Melkor get, there's always something just satisfying about watching the bully get the bully get bullied, right?
That's true.
So
yeah.
Anyway, so we have Melkor. He is finally put, there's peace in the world for a long age. Melkor is taken back as a prisoner, and all the way. And so, it's like, okay, things have changed now in Middle Earth, right? Okay, so this has gone from being under the sway of Melkor and his minions to being under the power of the Valar now, right? So good times, good things. And Melkor actually does sue for pardon from Manwë, but he's like, no. And he gets cast into Mondos. And remember, Mondos is actually the name of like the place of doom, right? The kind of this realm of the dead, where people go, where elves go when they die, and others go when they're imprisoned. And so, think about it as like kind of the deepest, darkest dungeon on earth, right? And nobody can break free from it, right? Nobody can break free from it unless Mondos himself allows you to, right? So he's there, and he's going to be there for a very long time.
Three ages.
3 ages long.
3 ages long.
So
yeah.
So
which seems fair.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, for sure. I mean, he needs to, you can't kill him, right?
No.
Because he's immortal, but and he's really a spirit. But it's like, but you can, you can't make him think about what he's done for a really long time.
Absolutely.
I think, was it really worth it?
Yep.
Was it really worth it?
Yeah.
All right. So the next question the Valar have to decide is, what do we do with the Quindi now? Do we just let them do their own thing? Do we let them hang out in Middle Earth and like kind of create their own civilization over here? Or do we invite them to come live with us in the Blessed Realm? All right. So what it says is, for some, and of those Ulmo is the chief, held that the Quindi should be left free to walk as they would in Middle Earth, and with their gifts of skill to order all the lands and heal their hurts. But the most part feared for the Quindi in the dangerous world amid the deceits of the starlit dusk, and they were filled moreover with the love of the beauty of the elves and desired their fellowship. At the last, therefore, the Valar summoned the Quindi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers and the light of the trees forever. And Mondos broke his silence, saying, "So it is doomed. From this summons came many woes that afterwards befell." So some of the Valar want them to stay, but the majority decide they want them to come to the Blessed Realm. They want to invite them to come to the Blessed Realm and to live there with them forever. So, and this is going to cause issues. It's going to cause issues. I mean, what do you think, Greta? How would you have voted?
I'm on Ulmo's side.
You're on Ulmo's side?
I would have let them stay in Middle Earth. I mean, I understand. I mean, I can understand where the Valar are coming from.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I think it's selfish. I think that they I mean, I understand wanting someone to like to have fellowship with people that you really like. Like, I understand that. But I mean, I think they should have let the elves make the decision for themselves.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to come, great. If not, fine. You know, like, not punish those that didn't want to go. It'd be nice to have the option, but I don't think it should have been mandatory.
Well, I mean, it turns out I think they do have the option, but I think it's a question of like, should they have like kind of left them? Should they have even issued an invitation to any? Right? Even made this a possibility for them is maybe more of the question.
Okay.
Because we're going to find out that many don't even begin the journey, right? Many don't accept the invitation.
But they're punished for it, I feel like.
I don't know. And only in the sense, I don't think they're punished for it. I think they're only punished
not by the Valar, but it causes a lot. Let me
finish what I'm saying. Like,
okay.
So I don't I don't think they're punished for it in the sense of like the Valar are going to be like, well, you didn't choose us, so we're going to make life hard on you, right? It's like we want you to come be with us so you can have an easier life, right? So you can enjoy the Blessed Realm with us, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're not, there's no active punishment going on, right? It's only in the sense of like, and I don't think you can argue there's any punishment, right? Because like to invite somebody to come join you in a beautiful place, but they decide not to, they're deciding not to, right? So there's a, they've made their choice essentially, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a good way to go about it. But the question, I guess, is, maybe Ulmo would have vouched for is to say, should we even invite them? Is that even right for them, right, to come and live in the Blessed Realm? Or is there, is it right that they should like kind of dwell in this land to the east, right? To the, they should fill this other world, and that we should live over here in the Blessed Realm. Maybe we can have, kind of like, fellowship, and maybe they can come visit us from time to time. I don't know, but like, like, should it even be an option? Should it even be an option for them?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. And by I'm punished by the Valar. That's not what I was getting at. What I was trying to say is I felt like the elves as a people were not directly punished, but there was consequences, like big time consequences. Like there was division. Right. Yeah. And instead of living as one people, now they're all kind of like spread out, because some go and some don't, and some go halfway. And, like, I just hate that it was, that it caused that kind of rift, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly. And, of course, there wasn't any way for the Valar to know of that, right? Like, I mean, other than just the debate, like that, I guess the ones that voted would have said to themselves, like, well, why not? Why can't we invite people, some of them to like invite them to come live with us, and some of them will choose that, right? Whereas Olmo would have, was of the party that said it's not right. The Blessed Realm isn't the right place for them, right? That there's other beauties in this world, and they're here to do a certain thing in the world over there, right? To bring greater beauty to it, to do their own thing over there.
I feel like it's almost like stacking a team.
Well, I feel like it's almost like the question of, you ever heard that thing where it's like, and I don't know if this is actually true, but like if you like help a butterfly, like when it's first bursting from its cocoon, if you like help it, like kind of give it help getting out, it like won't actually like learn to fly because it's gotta kind of
I
struggle.
think it's the same thing with a bird hatching out of an egg.
Yeah. We get it, whether it's true or not, you get the idea, right? That things have to learn to like kind of have to go through the natural struggle of growing. And as a parent, you see this with kids too. Like the question is always, do we like make, they're facing a problem? Do we intervene and like make life easier on them, or do we just let them struggle, right? Because of that will produce its own good over time, right? That will produce its own natural good over time. And I feel like that's the question, right? Like, is like, can they create their own Blessed Realm in Middle Earth? Or do we have or is the only hope for them to invite them to our Blessed Realm, right?
Yeah. And no, when you put it that way, I feel like it was almost, I feel like they were maybe cheating the elves a little bit. And I'm not saying that maybe there would come a time where it would be appropriate, but I think they kind of jumped the gun. I mean, Melkor is locked up. Right. He's no danger. I mean, I'm assuming these orcs and stuff are still around, right? Because they couldn't capture all the orcs or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not the same danger that's being posed that there was, before Melkor was captured. So, I'm holding to that it was just not. I don't think it was a good idea. What's your opinion?
I mean, I think it's hard, it's hard for us to have a like it's Monday morning quarterback because we know what happens, but
That's
like
true.
but I think I'm of the mindset that like, Ilúvatar planted them here, and maybe their role is to beautify, to do what we did in Aman, to do that to the rest of the world, right? Maybe that's why he put them over here, right? And maybe they're here to beautify the rest of the world in preparation for the coming of the second born, of the younger children of Ilúvatar, right?
Yeah.
So, I think I would have sided with Olmo as well.
And you think about it from the elves' perspective, right? Like they've just awakened, like they barely have their bearings at this point. The only Valar that they've actually met is Orome, right?
Yeah.
And that's someone that Melkor already put doubts in their hearts about. So it's not like they had a relationship with the Valar to speak of at this point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like someone that you've never even met. Like it would be almost like, some king or whatever of some foreign land that you've never even met before.
Right.
It's like saying, hey, come vacation with me.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
And like it just seems a little weird too.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think, I don't know, I just always I fall back on like it's just better for just about any creature in its natural development to like have to like kind of go through the natural struggles given to it at a certain place, given to it in a certain state in life, right? To to the like, I think like what you said, like they defeated Melkor. They've ensured Melkor isn't going to be a problem. Yes, there are other creatures, but like that are out here. But the world is it's not necessarily a just 100% safe place. But it's like you can't just protect people all the time, right? You got to let people live their lives, right? And you got to let people like fight their battles and struggle, because it's like through those things we become who we're meant to be.
Exactly.
Right. So I don't know. That's interesting question that's drawn out by this debate.
Absolutely.
But they do summon them. They do summon them to Valinor, and it begins this great journey. But of course, before they actually get to that journey, there has to be they're very uncertain about this, right? Because they know a great journey lies ahead. So what the Valar do is they invite three of the elves, three of the Eldar, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. They invite them to Valinor as ambassadors, right? So they come, they see it, and then they go back and they tell all their elvish brethren, you guys got to see this place. It is amazing, right? And so many follow them, but others don't. And so these three elf fathers, I guess you could call them, they become like kind of the high kings of the particular groups of three particular groups of elves that end up making this journey, that undertake this journey. We've got Ingwe, who is the Lord of the Vanyar. Okay. We've got Finwë, who is the Lord of the Noldor. And then we have Elwë, who is the Lord of the Teleri. Okay. So, and remember, if you want to remember that table in the back that shows all the different divisions of the elves. This is where this is going to start to make sense for you. Okay. And that table can be really helpful. So basically you have these three groups of elves who decide they want to undertake this journey. And then you have all of the other elves who decide they don't want to, and those are the Avari, the unwilling, right? So you have a bunch that just never even leave the region of Cuiviénen, and they remain back there. And we don't really hear much about them for a long period of time. And honestly, I'm not even sure we hear much about any of them at any point in the story. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on that for those of you who are experts on the elves, but I think the only ones I'm not really sure we ever hear about any of Avari, any of the unwilling, those, in other words, those who don't even begin the journey. Okay. But for all those that do begin the journey, essentially the Vanyar and the Noldor, it's actually, I think it's pronounced more like Noldor because I always see the N with the tilde over it. But Vanyar and Noldor, they all do eventually complete the journey to Valinor. The vast majority of those two groups complete the journey to Valinor. And then the Teleri is actually a very large group, right? So you can kind of think about like the Vanyar and the Noldor are like extremely excited to get to the Blessed Realm. And the Teleri are they're more like, they want to stop and smell the flowers along the way, right? They're just like, oh, this is nice. This is cool. Like, let's check this out. And they get to the sea and they're like, wow, this is amazing. We love the sea, right? And it's a much larger group. In fact, it's so large that they actually need two kings. They've got Elwë and then they've got Olwë, right? So two kings. Olwë is Elwë's brother. And so they're going to take a longer time. And because they do take a longer time, there's different stages at which certain groups of the Teleri fall off, right? Can you open up to the table back there?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So, and from those groups that fall off from the Teleri are going to come like a lot of the Sylvan elves. There's going to be a large group called the Sindar who remain behind in Beleriand. And the Sylvan elves, of course, would be the kind of the green elves, the ones we think of as Mirkwood that Legolas eventually come from. So if you're looking at that map in the back, you've got the Avari and the Eldar. The Eldar are the people of the stars, the ones that make the journey. Vanyar, Noldor, Teleri. And then some of the Teleri end up making the journey to the Blessed Realm. And then you've got the Sindar. They fall off in Beleriand. So that's kind of that's the close. They get pretty close to leaving, but they never quite make the final journey across the sea. Then you've got the Nondor, those that left the march of the Teleri east of the Misty Mountains. So the Misty Mountains exist in this time, and they have to make their way over the Misty Mountains, which is a big, it actually says that Melkor put those there to make life harder on Orome getting to the elves in the first place. So that's why the Misty Mountains are always such a bear, right? Because Melkor raised them himself. But you have the Nondor, and they don't actually make it over the Misty Mountains, they begin the journey but don't make it over the Misty Mountains in the first place. And then you have the Lyquendi, the green elves of Assyriand, and they do actually make it a little further, on, but I think later on. So, and they're broken out into the Calaquendi, the Elves of Light, those who do finally get to Valinor and the Blessed Realm, and they're the Elves of Light because they bask in the two trees, the glow of the two trees, right? And you have the Morroquendi, who are the elves of darkness, right? That never actually see the light of Valinor. So that's how you break it all down. But yeah, once again, the ones that are going to be of most concern for us for the next several chapters of this, really for the rest of the Silmarillion, the main ones are the Noldor and the Teleri, and the Sendar can be called out in there, but other ones will be spoken of as well at different times. So yeah, so that now you are all expert on elves, right? You all understand all these different names of elves, and it is going to be very helpful for you going forward to make sense of the Silmarillion once you've understood these things.
For sure.
I don't know, Greta, did I like skip over anything in that last part? Because really the last part of it is just a lot of really interesting discussion about like the different groups of elves and how far they make it and those sorts of questions. But you feel I did a good job of covering that?
Yeah, I think you did a good job of hitting the high points. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to hit on.
All right.
Yeah.
Right on.
That's good.
All right. Well, let's do some haiku, shall we?
Yes.
All right. You didn't sound too sure there yet.
No, I was just looking at this one thing that I underlined, and I was trying to figure out if it was worth mentioning or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna share this real quick. So
Okay.
I take back what I just said. There's one more thing I want to mention here.
All right.
Talking about the elves' journey and things like that. It says, and though all were yet willing to wander, many feared rather their journey's end than hoped for it. And I don't know, that just kind of stuck out to me because they're all willing to wander. Like they're explorers at heart, right?
Yeah.
But that fear versus hope in what the journey's end, that was really the difference, right? Because some, like we said, like the Vanyar and the Noldor, they were excited and they were hopeful about what they would find at the end.
Yeah.
Whereas the others were afraid.
Right.
And so that was really the deciding factor. I think some, I think that it's just that the willingness, that willingness doesn't always overcome fear. Yeah. I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say. And so I found that was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and given what we had talked about, with the should they have invited them or not, maybe it was better that they I mean, it's like, man, that's a long journey to undertake from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
It really is. Yeah. And it's not like any of them had hardened their hearts. I think they're all open to the idea. It sounds like, to at least explore and see, see what this Middle Earth was all about. But maybe it was just having an actual destination that was off-putting.
Yeah.
Maybe if they'd just been allowed to wander and set up camp where they felt like they should, that would have been the better bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Haiku.
Let's do some haiku.
Let's do it.
All right. Here we go. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Boom.
Boom. You win.
All right. You go first.
All right. Let's see if I had lots of scribbles on here. Where is it? Oh, here we go. I found it. All right. Awakened, summoned, sundered. First, but no longer one. Selfish Valar.
Ooh. Big selfish jerks.
Oh, it just made me really sad.
Yeah.
I feel like they would have been happier as one.
They're
still first.
Yeah.
But no longer one. And that made me sad.
Yeah. Firstborn, but no longer one people.
Not one people.
No longer one people.
It just made me really sad.
Yeah. It's very melancholy.
That's appropriate, I think.
Ready to hear mine?
Yes.
Ages endlessly pass under stars. Let me try that again. Ages endlessly passed under stars. Time's fullness. Firstborn awaken.
Nice. I like it. It's good. But I like mine better.
Boom. Well, that's why you wrote it.
They're both really good. Let's just be honest about that.
Let's hear some listener haiku here.
Yeah, let's do it.
First off, we got Michael H.
Michael H.
Oh wait. I'm sorry. That one was. I'm not. That actually was from chapter 2, which I think we read last time. I forgot to take that off my list. It looks like. I don't know that we have a more recent one from Michael. So, Michael, if you send one in, then we'll read it on our live stream probably.
Yeah.
We do have one from Red Hawk from February 16th. He actually sent 2.
Oh, nice.
Twinkle, twinkle stars, how elves wonder what you are. Silmaril so nigh.
Ooh, I like
Nice.
that.
Nice.
Clever.
The other one is first sight was starlight, soothing sound, water flowing. Quendi came that night. Nice.
I like
Nice.
that. Yes.
I like that little note just of the that's the first sound they heard, you know.
That's
Cool
good.
sound.
Good stuff.
And then we have also a haiku from Samuel P. Here we go. Looks like you also sent 2. 3 elven rulers, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë, lead march to Aman.
Good.
Nice.
Very good.
And then the second one, Dark Enemy Chained by Tulkas. Let's try that again. Dark Enemy Chained by Tulkas. Melkor humbled, falls at Mondo's feet.
Ooh.
Boom.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Very, very good, guys. Thank you.
Good stuff, you guys. Good stuff.
Yes.
If you want your haiku read on a future episode, get it in, right? You know, go ahead and get it in as soon as you think, right? So well, I probably need to update the schedule on the site, but listen to this one right now, you probably got a day or 2 to get in for chapter 4. So get it in, right? And while you're at it, why not do chapter 5, right? And chapter 6 and chapter 7, right? Keep them bookmarked so we can come back to them. All right. Don't forget about, don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes, right? Rating and review on iTunes or the platform of your choice. Subscribe, rate, and review. And make sure that rating is 5 stars so you can show the world just how much you love the Tolkien Road. Drop us a line, make that correspondence happen, people. And this month's live stream, once again, is scheduled for Wednesday, February 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. We'll be discussing our journey over the last month, as well as all of the big news in Tolkiendom from the last few weeks, which has been a lot.
It's been
a lot to talk about.
We're gonna have yes.
This is your guys' chance to be a part of that conversation in real time.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
All right. Thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T.,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S.,
Brian O.,
Emilio P.,
Zeke F.,
James A.,
James L.,
Chris L.,
Chuck F.,
Azia V.,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C.,
David of Pints with Jack,
Jonathan D.,
Eric S.,
Eric B.,
Johanna T.,
Mike M.,
Robert H.,
Paul D.,
Julia,
Werty,
Matthew W.,
Joe Bagelman,
and Chris K.
Thanks, guys.
As well as those celebrating their Patreon anniversary this month in February of 2022, Sarah W.,
Du Verrailleur,
Robert H.,
John R.,
Ish of the Hammer,
Kat L.,
Aja V.,
David Bigwood,
Sarah M.,
Eric B.,
and Chuck F.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all so much, and we will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.